Sarah Martinez stepped off the bus at Fort Benning with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly as she looked around at the dozens of other recruits who would become her fellow soldiers. At 22, she was older than most of the fresh-faced 18 and 19-year-olds who surrounded her. Her long black hair was tied back in a tight ponytail, and she wore simple jeans and a plain white t-shirt. The other recruits barely glanced at her as they formed loose groups, chatting nervously about what lay ahead. Sarah kept to herself, observing quietly. She had learned long ago that it was better to watch and listen before making judgments about people. Her dark eyes took in every detail of the military base that would be her home for the next several months. "Listen up, maggots." A drill sergeant's voice boomed across the courtyard, causing every conversation to stop instantly. "You are no longer civilians. From this moment forward, you belong to the United States Army. Some of you think you're tough. Some of you think you know what hard work means. You're all wrong." Sarah stood at attention with the rest of the group as Drill Sergeant Johnson, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, paced in front of them. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his boots shined to a mirror finish. Everything about him screamed discipline and authority. "You will be divided into platoons. You will eat together, sleep together, train together, and suffer together. By the time I'm done with you, you'll either be soldiers or you'll be heading home with your tail between your legs." The recruits were herded into a large building where they received their initial gear and assignments. Sarah found herself assigned to 3rd Platoon Bravo Company. As she carried her equipment to the barracks, she could hear other recruits already starting to form friendships and alliances. Her bunk was in a long room filled with metal beds and lockers. The recruit in the bunk next to hers was a blonde girl named Jessica, who looked like she had never done a hard day's work in her life. Across from them were 2 guys, Mike and Derek, who were already comparing their high school football statistics. "So where are you from?" Jessica asked Sarah as they made their beds according to the strict military specifications they had been shown. "California," Sarah replied simply, focusing on getting her sheets perfectly tight. "Cool. I'm from Connecticut. My dad was in the Army too. He says basic training is all mental. If you can handle the mind games, the physical stuff is easy." Jessica chattered on, seemingly unaware that Sarah wasn't really participating in the conversation. That evening at dinner, Sarah sat alone at the end of a long table, eating her meal quietly, while the other recruits got to know each other. She could hear fragments of conversations around her, talk about girlfriends back home, college plans, and family expectations. None of it interested her much. What's her deal? She heard someone whisper and she knew they were talking about her. She had dealt with whispers and stares her entire life, so this was nothing new. The next morning began at 4:30 a.m. with the harsh sound of a whistle and shouting drill sergeants. Sarah was already awake. Having been unable to sleep well in the unfamiliar environment, she quickly dressed and fell into formation with the rest of her platoon. "Physical training time," Drill Sergeant Martinez announced. Sarah noted that he shared her last name, though she doubted they were related. "We're going to see what kind of shape you soft civilians are really in." The PT session was brutal. Push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, and a long run through the humid Georgia morning. Sarah kept pace easily, her breathing steady and controlled while many of the other recruits struggled. Years of working physical jobs and staying in shape had prepared her well. During a water break, she overheard Mike talking to Derek. "Did you see the quiet chick? Sarah or whatever, she's in better shape than half the guys here. Weird that she doesn't talk to anyone, though. Probably thinks she's too good for us." "Maybe she's just shy," Derek replied, though he didn't sound convinced. As the days passed, Sarah's reserved nature began to draw more attention from her fellow recruits. While everyone else bonded over shared struggles and complaints about the drill sergeants, Sarah remained distant. She performed every task competently, followed every order precisely, but kept her personal thoughts and feelings to herself. During weapons training, she demonstrated a natural aptitude that surprised everyone, including the instructors. Her shots were consistently on target. Her weapon handling was smooth and confident. When asked where she had learned to shoot, she simply said she had grown up around guns. The whispers about her grew louder. Some recruits speculated that she was former military. Others thought she might be some kind of spy or plant. The more mysterious she remained, the more elaborate the theories became. One evening, while everyone was writing letters home, Jessica tried once again to draw Sarah into conversation. "Don't you want to write to anyone? Your family must be wondering how you're doing. Sarah looked up from the book she was reading. They know I'm fine. Come on, don't you miss anyone? A boyfriend, maybe? Jessica pressed. No, Sarah replied simply, returning to her book. This only fueled more speculation. The other recruits began to view her as strange, possibly even dangerous. Her competence in training exercises, combined with her silence about her past, created an aura of mystery that made some people uncomfortable. Drill Sergeant Johnson noticed the dynamic developing in the platoon. During one particularly difficult day of combat training, he pulled Sarah aside. Martinez, what's your story? You're performing well, but you're not integrating with your unit. In the Army, we depend on each other. Nobody fights alone. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I'm here to become a soldier, Sergeant. I'll do whatever the Army requires of me. That's not what I asked. Your fellow recruits don't know what to make of you. Some of them are starting to think you're hiding something important. Is that true? For a moment, Sarah considered opening up, but old habits died hard. No, Sergeant. I just prefer to keep my personal business private. Johnson studied her for a long moment. Privacy is one thing, Martinez, but if you want to survive in the military, you need to learn to trust your unit. Think about that. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk listening to the quiet conversations of her bunkmates. She had always been a loner, preferring to rely on herself rather than risk disappointment or betrayal. But she was beginning to realize that military life might require her to change that approach. As she drifted off to sleep, she could feel the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she sensed that her fellow recruits' curiosity about her was only going to grow stronger. The fourth week of basic training brought new challenges and increased tension within 3rd Platoon. Sarah had continued to excel in every aspect of training, while maintaining her wall of silence about her personal life. This combination was beginning to irritate some of her fellow recruits, particularly a group led by a recruit named Brad Thompson. Brad was everything Sarah was not. Loud, boastful, and constantly seeking attention. He came from a wealthy family in Texas and never let anyone forget it. From day one, he had positioned himself as an unofficial leader among the recruits, though his actual performance in training was mediocre at best. I'm telling you guys, there's something off about that Martinez chick, Brad said during a break between training exercises. He kept his voice low but made sure it was loud enough for Sarah to overhear. Nobody's that good at everything without some kind of background. Either she's lying about her experience or she's here for some other reason. Several recruits gathered around him, including Mike and a few others who had grown frustrated with Sarah's mysterious nature. Jessica remained notably absent from these conversations, though she watched from a distance with concern. Maybe she's already military, suggested another recruit named Chris. Like, maybe she's testing us or something. Or maybe she's just a show-off who thinks she's better than everyone else, Brad replied with a sneer. Either way, I'm getting tired of it. Sarah heard every word but showed no reaction. She had dealt with bullies before, and knew that responding would only escalate the situation. Instead, she focused on cleaning her rifle, each movement precise and methodical. During the next training exercise, which involved navigating an obstacle course while carrying full gear, Brad made his move. As Sarah approached a particularly challenging wall climb, he accidentally bumped into her, causing her to lose her grip and fall backward into the mud. Oops, sorry, Martinez, he said with mock concern. Guess you're not as perfect as you pretend to be. Sarah pulled herself out of the mud without a word and completed the obstacle course. Despite now carrying an extra 20 pounds of wet dirt on her uniform and equipment, her time was still better than Brad's clean run. Drill Sergeant Johnson witnessed the incident but said nothing at the time. However, that evening he called both recruits to his office. Thompson, Martinez, sit down. His voice was deadly calm, which somehow made it more intimidating than his usual shouting. I saw what happened on the obstacle course today. Thompson, you want to explain to me why you thought it was appropriate to interfere with another recruit's training? Brad immediately went on the defensive. It was an accident, Sergeant. I was just trying to get past her and we collided. Is that right, Martinez? Did you two collide accidentally? Sarah met Johnson's eyes. I fell, Sergeant. It happens during training. Johnson studied them both for a long moment. Thompson, I've been watching you. You're a mediocre soldier who spends more time running his mouth than improving his performance. Martinez, you're an excellent soldier who doesn't know how to be part of a team. Both of those things will get people killed in combat. He stood up and paced behind his desk. I'm assigning you two as battle buddies for the rest of basic training. You'll do everything together. You'll learn to work as a team or you'll both wash out. Understood? Both recruits snapped to attention. Yes, Sergeant. The battle buddy system was designed to build trust and cooperation between soldiers. But pairing Sarah with Brad had the opposite effect. Brad was furious at being disciplined and took out his anger by making Sarah's life as difficult as possible within the bounds of their assignment. During shared duties, he would deliberately perform tasks incorrectly, forcing Sarah to fix his mistakes or face punishment for both of them. He criticized her constantly, questioning every decision she made and undermining her confidence whenever possible. You think you're so smart, don't you? He said one evening as they cleaned their shared equipment. Well, let me tell you something, Princess. I know your type. You're probably some rich girl who thinks slumming it in the army makes you special. Well, it doesn't. Sarah continued cleaning her weapon without responding, but Brad's words stung more than she wanted to admit. She had grown up poor, working multiple jobs to support her family, but she couldn't explain that without revealing more about her background than she was comfortable sharing. The harassment continued for days. Brad recruited other recruits to his cause, creating an atmosphere of hostility within the platoon. They began calling Sarah Mystery Girl and Princess, making jokes about her silence and speculating about her past in increasingly cruel ways. Jessica tried to defend her a few times, but she was easily intimidated by the group's aggression. Just tell them something about yourself, she pleaded with Sarah one night. Anything. They just want to know you're human like the rest of us. Why should I have to prove my humanity to them? Sarah replied quietly. I'm doing everything required of me. That should be enough. But it's not enough, Jessica said sadly. Not for them. They see your silence as arrogance and they're taking it personally. The situation came to a head during a night training exercise. The platoon was practicing stealth movements in the dark, working in pairs to complete various objectives. Sarah and Brad were assigned to secure a mock enemy position, a task that required coordination and trust. As they approached their target, Brad made a decision that would put both of their futures in jeopardy. Instead of following the planned route that Sarah had mapped out, he deliberately took a different path that would expose them to the enemy observers. This way, he whispered, pointing toward an area with no cover. That's not the route, Sarah whispered back. We'll be spotted immediately. I'm making the call here, Princess. Just follow orders for once. Sarah faced a choice. She could follow Brad into an obviously flawed plan that would result in failure for both of them, or she could refuse to go along with his sabotage. Either choice would likely escalate the conflict between them. She made her decision quickly. No, I won't be part of your failure just because you have a personal problem with me. Brad's face twisted with anger in the darkness. Fine, do it your way. But when this is over, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are. You don't know anything about what kind of person I am, Sarah replied, her voice still quiet, but now carrying an edge that made Brad step back slightly. They completed the exercise using Sarah's route, achieving their objective flawlessly, but Brad's threat hung in the air between them, and Sarah knew that whatever came next would force her to reveal more about herself than she had ever intended. As they returned to base that night, Sarah realized that her strategy of remaining mysterious and aloof was no longer sustainable. The hostility in her platoon was affecting unit cohesion and morale, and sooner or later the drill sergeants would demand answers. She would have to decide how much of her past she was willing to reveal to protect her future in the Army. The tension in 3rd Platoon reached a breaking point during the 6th week of basic training. Brad Thompson had spent days building his case against Sarah, gathering supporters and spreading rumors that grew more elaborate with each telling. According to the latest version of the story making rounds through the barracks, Sarah was either a spy, a criminal hiding from the law, or the daughter of some high-ranking military official using a fake identity. The breaking point came during a routine uniform inspection. Drill Sergeant Johnson was conducting his weekly review, examining each recruit's appearance with the intensity of a forensic investigator. Everything had to be perfect. Boots polished to a mirror shine, uniform pressed with knife-sharp creases, hair styled to exact military specifications. Sarah stood at attention as Johnson approached her position. Her uniform was, as always, immaculate, But as he began his inspection, Brad chose that moment to execute his plan. "Sergeant Johnson, sir," Brad called out, breaking formation. "I have something important to report about Recruit Martinez." The entire platoon froze. Breaking formation during inspection was a serious breach of protocol that could result in severe punishment. Johnson's face darkened as he turned toward Brad. "Thompson, you better have a damn good reason for interrupting my inspection." Brad straightened his shoulders, clearly believing he was about to expose some great deception. "Sergeant, I believe Recruit Martinez has been lying about her background and qualifications. Her performance is too good for someone with no military experience. I think she's hiding something that could compromise unit security." The barracks fell dead silent. Every recruit held their breath, waiting to see how this confrontation would unfold. Sarah remained at attention, her face showing no emotion, but inside she felt a familiar anger building. Johnson looked from Brad to Sarah and back again. "That's a serious accusation, Thompson. You're claiming that Recruit Martinez has falsified her enlistment documents." "I'm saying that someone doesn't get this good this fast without prior training, Sergeant. And if she's lying about that, what else is she lying about?" "I see." Johnson's voice was dangerously quiet. "And what evidence do you have to support this accusation?" Brad faltered slightly. He had expected his word to be enough, but now he realized he had no actual proof of wrongdoing. "Well, sir, she won't talk about her background. She's secretive about everything. And her shooting scores are better than some of the instructors. So your evidence is that she's private about her personal life and she's good at her job?" Johnson asked. "Thompson, are you familiar with the concept of natural ability? Some people are just better at certain things than others." The drill sergeant turned to Sarah. "Martinez, step forward." Sarah took 2 steps forward and snapped to attention. "Yes, Sergeant." "Thompson here seems to think you're hiding something. He believes you have prior military training that you haven't disclosed. Is that true?" "No, Sergeant. I have never served in any branch of the military before enlisting." "Have you falsified any information on your enlistment documents?" "No, Sergeant." Johnson studied her face carefully. "Then explain to me why you're so much better at this than your fellow recruits." For the first time since arriving at basic training, Sarah hesitated. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she still wasn't prepared for it. Revealing her past would mean opening herself up to judgment and questions she didn't want to answer. "I grew up in a difficult situation, Sergeant. I learned to be self-sufficient early." "That's not an answer, Martinez. I want specifics." Sarah took a deep breath. She could feel every eye in the platoon focused on her, waiting for the mysterious quiet girl to finally reveal her secrets. "I grew up in East Los Angeles, Sergeant. My father left when I was 8. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. I started working when I was 12, off-the-book stuff, helping at my uncle's auto shop, cleaning offices at night, whatever I could find." The barracks remained silent, but Sarah could sense the shift in atmosphere. This wasn't the privileged background many of them had imagined. "Continue," Johnson ordered. "When I was 14, my mother got sick. Cancer. The medical bills ate up everything we had saved. I had to quit school and work full-time to pay for her treatments and keep us from losing our apartment." Jessica let out a small gasp, but Sarah continued without looking at her. "My uncle taught me how to shoot because the neighborhood was dangerous. I had to walk home from work late at night, and there were situations. I got good at it because missing could mean dying." Brad's confident expression was beginning to fade as he realized his assumptions about Sarah's background were completely wrong. "My mother died when I was 17. I spent the next 5 years working any job I could find. Construction, security, bouncing at bars. I got my GED through night classes and saved every penny I could. I joined the Army because I wanted something better than barely surviving paycheck to paycheck." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Several recruits were staring at the ground, clearly uncomfortable with having misjudged Sarah so badly. Johnson nodded slowly. "That explains the physical fitness, the weapon handling, and the discipline. What it doesn't explain is why you've kept all of this to yourself. Your fellow soldiers have been trying to get to know you for weeks." Sarah finally looked around at her platoon mates, seeing shame and regret on many faces. "Because every time I've told people about my background, they either feel sorry for me or they assume I'm damaged goods. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want to be judged. I just wanted to be evaluated on my performance." "Well, you got your wish," Johnson said, "but you also created a problem. Thompson here felt justified in making accusations because you wouldn't communicate with your unit. In the Army, we depend on trust and communication. You can't have one without the other. He turned to address the entire platoon. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Making assumptions about people without facts makes you stupid. Accusing fellow soldiers without evidence makes you dangerous. And keeping your teammates at arm's length makes you ineffective. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Several other recruits who had participated in the harassment were studying their boots with great interest. Thompson, Johnson continued, you owe Martinez an apology. Not just for today, but for weeks of harassment based on nothing but your own insecurity. Sergeant, That wasn't a suggestion, Thompson. Brad looked at Sarah, his face red with embarrassment. Martinez, I'm sorry. I was wrong about you. About everything. Sarah nodded once. Apology accepted. Johnson looked around the barracks one more time. Dismissed. And I better not hear about any more problems with unit cohesion. We're soldiers, not middle school kids. As the platoon dispersed, several recruits approached Sarah. Jessica was the first, tears in her eyes. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. It's okay, Sarah replied quietly. I didn't want you to know. Mike and Derek appeared next, both looking ashamed. We should have stood up for you, Mike said. We knew Brad was being a jerk, but we went along with it anyway. One by one, nearly every member of the platoon came forward to apologize or offer words of support. Sarah accepted each apology graciously, though she remained somewhat guarded. The last person to approach her was Brad. He waited until everyone else had left before walking over to where she was organizing her locker. Martinez, I need you to know that what I did was wrong on every level. I made assumptions about you because you made me feel inadequate. You were better at everything, and you didn't need anyone's approval. I resented that. Sarah looked at him carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know that this wasn't really about you. It was about my own insecurities. I thought if I could tear you down, it would make me feel better about my own failures. For the first time, Sarah saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Thank you for being honest. That takes courage. Brad nodded and walked away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She had finally opened up about her past, but she wondered if she had revealed too much. Only time would tell if this new transparency would help or hurt her journey through basic training. The weeks following Sarah's revelation brought a dramatic shift in the dynamics of 3rd Platoon. Where once there had been suspicion and hostility, now there was a grudging respect and even admiration for her resilience. However, this newfound acceptance came with its own challenges that Sarah hadn't anticipated. Jessica had become almost protective of her, constantly checking to make sure she was okay and including her in every conversation. While Sarah appreciated the gesture, she found the sudden attention overwhelming after months of solitude. You don't have to take care of me, Sarah told Jessica one evening, as they prepared for lights out. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I know you have, Jessica replied, folding her uniform with military precision. But you don't have to anymore. We're a team now, right? Sarah nodded, though she still felt uncomfortable with the idea of depending on others. Years of self-reliance weren't easily overcome by a few weeks of acceptance. The real test of the platoon's new unity came during the 8th week of basic training, when they were assigned their most challenging exercise yet. A 3-day field training operation that would test everything they had learned about combat tactics, survival, and teamwork. Drill Sergeant Johnson gathered the platoon in the pre-dawn darkness, his face more serious than usual. Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Everything you've learned up to this point has been preparation for this exercise. You'll be dropped in the field with minimal supplies and tasked with completing a series of objectives while avoiding enemy contact. He paced in front of the assembled recruits, his boots crunching on the gravel. This is not a game. The scenarios you'll face are based on real combat situations. Your performance here will determine whether you graduate basic training or get recycled to start over with another platoon. The weight of his words settled over the group like a heavy blanket. After 2 months of training, the thought of starting over was terrifying to everyone. You'll be working in teams of 4, Johnson continued. Team leaders will be appointed based on demonstrated leadership abilities and tactical knowledge. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. She excelled at following orders and completing individual tasks, but leading others was something she had never been comfortable with. Growing up, she had learned that depending on others led to disappointment, so she had never developed the skills needed to inspire or guide a team. Team 1: Thompson, Wilson, Chen, Garcia. Team leader, Thompson. Brad straightened with pride as his name was called. Despite his earlier behavior, he had improved significantly and shown natural leadership qualities. Team 2: Martinez, Foster, Jackson, Riley. Team leader, Martinez. Sarah's heart sank. She had been hoping to serve as a team member, not a leader. Leading meant being responsible not just for her own success or failure, but for 3 other people as well. After receiving their mission briefings and equipment, the teams were transported to different starting points in the training area. Sarah's team consisted of Jessica, Mike, and a quiet recruit named David Riley, who had impressed everyone with his navigation skills. As their transport truck drove away, leaving them alone in the wilderness, Sarah looked at her 3 teammates. They were all looking at her expectantly, waiting for her to take charge and tell them what to do. "Okay," she said, pulling out the map and mission briefing. "We have 3 objectives to complete over the next 72 hours. We need to gather intelligence on enemy positions, destroy a supply depot, and extract a high-value target from a compound." Jessica leaned over to look at the map. "Which one should we do first?" Sarah studied the terrain and the locations of their objectives. Her tactical mind immediately began calculating distances, risks, and optimal routes. "The intelligence-gathering mission is closest to our current position and has the lowest risk. We'll start there and use what we learned to plan our approach to the other objectives." "Sounds good," Mike said. "Lead the way." As they began moving through the forest, Sarah found herself constantly second-guessing her decisions. Was she taking the right route? Should they move faster or more carefully? What if she made a mistake that got her team eliminated from the exercise? David noticed her hesitation during one of their rest stops. "Sarah, you're doing fine. Trust your instincts." "My instincts are telling me that I shouldn't be leading anyone," she admitted quietly. "Why not? You're the best tactician in our platoon. You see things the rest of us miss." Sarah shook her head. "Seeing the right move and convincing others to follow you are 2 different things. I've never been good at the second part." "You don't have to convince us," Jessica said, joining their conversation. "We already trust you. We've seen what you can do." Their first objective required them to observe and report on the activities at a mock enemy camp. Sarah positioned her team on a ridge overlooking the target area and began sketching the layout and documenting the patrol patterns. "There," she whispered, pointing to a gap in the patrol schedule. "We have a 12-minute window every hour when the north side of the camp is unguarded. If we needed to get closer, that would be our opportunity." Mike squinted through his binoculars. "How did you spot that?" "I've been watching for 20 minutes and didn't notice the pattern." "You watch individual guards." "I watch the system," Sarah explained. "Every security setup has weaknesses. You just have to be patient enough to find them." After completing their surveillance, they moved toward their second objective, destroying a supply depot. This mission required them to approach an enemy position, plant simulated explosives, and escape without being detected. As they crept through the underbrush toward the target, Sarah's natural tactical abilities took over. She positioned each team member to maximize their chances of success while maintaining escape routes. Her hand signals were clear and precise, her timing perfect. The mission went flawlessly. They planted their charges and escaped without triggering any alarms, earning full points for the exercise. "That was incredible," Jessica whispered as they regrouped at a safe distance. "It was like you could see everything before it happened." Sarah felt a small surge of pride, but it was tempered by worry about their final and most difficult objective, extracting the high-value target from a heavily guarded compound. This mission would require not just tactical skill, but also the ability to adapt quickly when things went wrong. As they settled in for the night to rest before the final mission, Sarah found herself thinking about leadership in a new way. Maybe being a good leader wasn't about being charismatic or inspirational. Maybe it was about seeing what needed to be done and helping others do it effectively. "Sarah," David said quietly as they took their watch shifts, "I've been in a lot of training exercises, but I've never felt as confident about completing the mission as I do with you leading us." "Why?" she asked genuinely. "Because you don't make decisions based on ego or what will make you look good. You make them based on what will work. That's the kind of leader I want to follow in combat." As Sarah stared up at the stars, she began to understand that her background, the self-reliance, the tactical thinking, the ability to remain calm under pressure, hadn't been obstacles to overcome. They were strengths that could help her become the kind of leader her team needed. Tomorrow would bring their greatest challenge yet, and for the first time since being assigned as team leader, Sarah felt ready to face it. The final day of the field training exercise dawned gray and humid, with heavy clouds promising rain before the day was over. Sarah's team had spent the night hidden in a grove of pine trees, taking turns on watch and preparing for their most challenging mission yet. The high-value target extraction required them to infiltrate a compound, locate and secure a simulated prisoner, and escort them to a pickup point without raising an alarm. Unlike their previous missions, this one had multiple layers of security and several possible complications built into the scenario. Sarah studied the intelligence they had gathered and the aerial photos provided in their mission packet. The compound was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, with guard towers at each corner and regular patrols both inside and outside the perimeter. The good news is that it's a training exercise, she told her team as they reviewed the plan one final time. The bad news is that they've designed it to test everything we've learned about tactics, teamwork, and problem-solving under pressure. Jessica checked her equipment for the third time. What's our biggest risk? Getting spotted during infiltration, Sarah replied. Once we're inside, we'll have more options. But if they detect us coming in, the whole mission fails. Mike pointed to the compound's eastern wall. What about that section there? It looks like there's less lighting. Sarah shook her head. That's exactly what they want us to think. See how the shadows fall? There's probably a motion sensor or infrared camera covering that area. They're counting on us to take the obvious route. David studied the photos more carefully. So what do you recommend? Sarah had been thinking about this problem all night. The conventional approach would be to find the weakest point in the perimeter and exploit it. But this was a training exercise designed to test unconventional thinking. We're going through the front gate, she said finally. The three other team members stared at her in disbelief. The front gate? Jessica asked. That's the most heavily guarded area. Exactly. Which is why they won't expect it. Sarah pointed to the guard rotation schedule they had observed during their reconnaissance. The gate guards change shift at 0300. For about 90 seconds, the new guards are getting briefed by the old guards. Everyone's attention is focused inward toward the compound. That's a pretty narrow window, Mike observed. It's enough time if we're fast and quiet. David, you're our navigator. Can you get us to the gate without using any of the obvious routes? David studied the topographical map. There's a drainage ditch that runs along the western approach. It's not on their patrol routes because it's partially flooded from yesterday's rain. We'd have to crawl through mud and water, but it would get us within 50 meters of the gate without being seen. Perfect. Jessica, once we're inside, you'll be our lookout while Mike and I locate the target. Your job is to watch for patrols and give us early warning if anything goes wrong. As they moved into position, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came over her in high-stress situations. Her mind became crystal clear, processing every detail of their environment and calculating risks and probabilities with mechanical precision. The drainage ditch was even worse than they had anticipated. The water was knee-deep and ice-cold, with a thick layer of mud at the bottom that sucked at their boots with every step. The smell of stagnant water and rotting vegetation was overwhelming, but Sarah's plan worked perfectly. They reached the gate just as the shift change began, and in the confusion of the handover, they slipped through the shadows and into the compound. Once inside, Sarah's team moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Jessica took position near the main building where she could observe the entire courtyard. David remained near the gate to ensure their escape route stayed clear. Sarah and Mike approached the detention building, where their target was supposedly being held. The building was a simple concrete structure with barred windows, and a single entrance guarded by two role-playing soldiers. Sarah studied their patrol pattern for several minutes before identifying their opportunity. They're checking their phones, she whispered to Mike. Every 15 minutes, both guards step away from the door to compare something on their screens, probably playing some kind of mobile game. When the moment came, Sarah and Mike moved like ghosts. They slipped past the distracted guards and into the building, where they found their prisoner, a drill sergeant named Williams who was playing the role of a captured intelligence officer. About time, Williams whispered with a grin. I was beginning to think nobody was coming for me. "We're here to get you out, sir," Sarah replied, staying in character. "But we need to move fast and stay quiet." The extraction went smoothly until they were halfway back to the gate. That's when everything went wrong. A spotlight suddenly blazed to life, sweeping across the courtyard in a search pattern. Somewhere in the compound, an alarm began to sound. Sarah's heart raced as she realized they had been detected. "Contact! Contact!" shouted one of the role-playing enemy soldiers. Prisoners escaping from Building C. Sarah's mind immediately shifted into crisis management mode. Their carefully planned escape route was now compromised, and they had seconds to adapt or fail the entire exercise. "Jessica, status report," she whispered into her radio. "Multiple hostiles moving toward your position from the north and east. The main gate is still clear, but not for long." Sarah looked around desperately for alternatives. They were pinned down behind a storage shed with armed role players converging on their position from two directions. In a real combat situation, this would be the kind of scenario where soldiers got killed. Then she spotted something that gave her an idea. A maintenance truck parked near the motor pool, keys still hanging in the ignition. "Mike, can you drive a stick shift?" she whispered. "Yeah, why?" "New plan. David, Jessica converge on the motor pool. We're driving out of here." "Are you serious?" Jessica's voice crackled over the radio. "Dead serious." "Move now!" What followed was the most chaotic 60 seconds of the entire exercise. Sarah's team sprinted across the compound under simulated enemy fire, dove into the maintenance truck, and crashed through the front gate while alarms blared and role players shouted orders. They drove for nearly a mile before stopping at their designated extraction point, where Drill Sergeant Johnson was waiting with a stopwatch and a clipboard. His expression was unreadable as they climbed out of the stolen truck. "Martinez," he said calmly. "That was either brilliant tactical adaptation or the most spectacular rule violation I've ever witnessed. I haven't decided which yet." Sarah stood at attention, her uniform soaked with mud and sweat. "Sergeant, the mission parameters were to extract the target and reach the pickup point. No restrictions were placed on methodology." Johnson studied her for a long moment before a slight smile appeared on his face. "Outstanding work, all of you. That was exactly the kind of creative problem-solving we want to see under pressure." The ride back to base was filled with excited chatter from her teammates, but Sarah remained quiet, processing what had just happened. For the first time in her life, she had been responsible for other people in a high-stress situation, and instead of letting her down, they had trusted her completely and followed her lead without question. "Sarah," Jessica said as they neared the base, "that was incredible. I've never seen anyone adapt that fast when a plan fell apart." "It's what anyone would have done," Sarah replied, though she knew that wasn't true. "No," David said firmly. "Most people panic when things go wrong. You got calmer. That's not normal. That's exceptional." When they arrived back at the barracks, news of their unconventional escape had already spread throughout the company. Other recruits gathered around to hear the story, and for once Sarah found herself at the center of attention for positive reasons. But the real validation came the next morning during the exercise debrief. Drill Sergeant Johnson announced the results in front of the entire company. Team 2, led by recruit Martinez, achieved a perfect score on all objectives and demonstrated exceptional leadership under adverse conditions. Their performance yesterday represents the gold standard for tactical thinking and team coordination. As the other recruits applauded, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before: the satisfaction of succeeding not just as an individual, but as a leader. She had protected her team, completed the mission, and earned the respect of her peers through competence rather than bravado. Later that day, as the platoon prepared for their final weeks of basic training, Brad Thompson approached Sarah with a different kind of respect in his eyes. "I owe you another apology," he said quietly. "I thought leadership was about being the loudest voice in the room. You showed me it's about being the clearest thinker when everything goes to hell." Sarah nodded, accepting his words. "We all learned something yesterday." As she settled into her bunk that night, Sarah realized that her journey through basic training had changed her in ways she never expected. She had come here to escape her past and build a new future. Instead, she had discovered that her past, all the hardship, all the self-reliance, all the difficult lessons, had been preparing her for this moment all along. The final weeks of basic training brought an intensity that none of the recruits had experienced before. With graduation approaching, every exercise became a final test of their readiness to become soldiers. Sarah had earned significant respect from her fellow recruits after the field training exercise, but she knew that one successful mission didn't guarantee anything. The weather had turned brutally hot, with temperatures reaching over 100 degrees during the day. The drill sergeant seemed to take particular pleasure in conducting the most demanding physical training during the hottest parts of the afternoon, testing not just the recruits' physical conditioning, but their mental toughness. During one particularly grueling combat training session, Sarah noticed that Jessica was struggling more than usual. Her friend's face was flushed red and she was stumbling slightly as they moved through tactical drills. Sarah had seen enough heat exhaustion during her construction jobs to recognize the warning signs. "Jessica, you need to hydrate," Sarah whispered during a brief pause between exercises. "I'm fine," Jessica replied, but her voice was shaky and she swayed slightly as she stood. Sarah made a quick decision. When Drill Sergeant Johnson called for the next evolution, she deliberately slowed her pace to stay close to Jessica. It was a risk. Falling behind during training could result in punishment for both of them. But Sarah couldn't ignore her teammates' distress. Sure enough, Johnson noticed immediately.
"Martinez!"
"What's your excuse for that pathetic performance?" Sarah came to attention. "No excuse, Sergeant. I didn't think so. Drop and give me 50 push-ups now." As Sarah began her punishment, she caught Jessica's grateful look. It was worth the extra physical stress to ensure her teammates' safety. But the incident had caught the attention of someone else who had been observing the training session. Commander Patricia Hayes was the base's executive officer, a decorated veteran who rarely intervened in day-to-day training activities. Sarah had seen her around the base but had never spoken to her directly. After the training session ended, Commander Hayes approached Sarah as she was cleaning her weapon. "Recruit Martinez, I'd like to speak with you privately." Sarah's stomach dropped. Being singled out by a senior officer was rarely a good sign, especially so close to graduation. She followed Commander Hayes to a small office building, her mind racing through possible infractions or mistakes she might have made. "Sit down," Hayes said, closing the door behind them. She was a tall woman with graying hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see everything. Her uniform bore the ribbons of multiple combat deployments and commendations for valor. "Sergeant Johnson has been giving me regular reports on your platoon's progress," Hayes began. "Your name has come up frequently." Sarah remained silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "He tells me you've had some challenges with unit integration, but that your tactical performance has been exceptional. He also mentioned that you sacrificed your own performance today to help a struggling teammate." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied carefully. Hayes studied her for a moment. "Tell me about your background, Martinez. What brought you to the Army?" Sarah gave the same brief summary she had shared with her platoon, focusing on her work history and motivation to serve. But Hayes pressed for more details, asking about specific jobs she had worked and challenges she had overcome. "You mentioned bouncing at bars," Hayes said. "That's not typical work for a young woman." "What kind of establishments?" Sarah hesitated. This was a part of her past she hadn't shared with anyone at basic training. "Rough places, ma'am. The kind where management needed someone who could handle trouble without creating bigger problems." "And you were good at it?" "Yes, ma'am. I learned to read people quickly and de-escalate situations before they turned violent. When that didn't work, I learned to end confrontations quickly and decisively." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Have you given any thought to your military occupational specialty after basic training?" "I've requested infantry, ma'am. I want to be where the action is." "Interesting choice. Most recruits with your background might consider military police or intelligence. Why infantry?" Sarah had to think about her answer. "Because that's where soldiers are made, ma'am. Everything else supports the infantry, but they're the ones who close with and destroy the enemy. I want to be part of that." Commander Hayes leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah with renewed interest. "You know, Martinez, the Army has several specialized units that might be interested in someone with your particular combination of skills and background." "Ma'am, units that require soldiers who can think independently, adapt quickly to changing situations, and operate effectively in high-stress environments. Soldiers who can blend into civilian populations, assess threats, and take decisive action when necessary." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Hayes was describing opportunities she hadn't even known existed. "What would that involve, ma'am?" "Additional training after basic, for starters. Advanced schools in tactics, languages, cultural awareness, and specialized combat techniques. Assignments that would challenge you in ways that conventional infantry units never could. Hayes paused, letting the implications sink in. But it would also mean accepting a level of responsibility and risk that goes well beyond normal military service. These units deploy frequently, often to places that don't officially exist, doing jobs that can't be discussed publicly. Sarah thought about everything that had led her to this moment: the poverty, the violence she had witnessed growing up, the constant struggle to survive and protect the people she cared about. The Army had already given her more purpose and direction than she had ever imagined possible. "Ma'am, how would someone express interest in opportunities like that?" Hayes smiled for the first time during their conversation. "By continuing to excel in training and demonstrating the qualities that brought you to my attention. Leadership under pressure, willingness to sacrifice for teammates, and the ability to make sound tactical decisions in chaotic situations." She stood up, indicating the meeting was over. "Finish basic training strong, Martinez. Graduate at the top of your class. After that, we'll see what doors open for you." As Sarah left the office, her mind was spinning with possibilities she had never considered. She had come to basic training hoping to build a stable career and serve her country. Now she was being presented with the opportunity to do something truly exceptional. That evening, as she shared the news with Jessica and her other teammates, she realized how much her perspective had changed over the past few months. The mysterious, solitary girl who had stepped off the bus at Fort Benning was gone. In her place was a confident soldier who understood the value of teamwork and trusted leadership. "So you might become some kind of special operations soldier?" Jessica asked excitedly. "That's amazing." "It's just a possibility," Sarah replied, but she couldn't hide her own excitement. "I still have to graduate first." "You will," Mike said confidently. "And when you do, you're going to do incredible things. I can feel it." As Sarah prepared for another night of military routine, she thought about Commander Hayes' words. She had always been someone who adapted to whatever life threw at her. Now, for the first time, she was being offered the chance to choose her own path forward. The possibilities were both thrilling and terrifying. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, surrounded by teammates who had become genuine friends, Sarah felt ready for whatever came next. Graduation day at Fort Benning arrived with the kind of crisp, clear morning that seemed designed for ceremony and celebration. Sarah stood in formation with 3rd Platoon, her dress uniform perfectly pressed and adorned with the marksmanship badges and leadership awards she had earned during training. The nervous, mysterious girl who had arrived 3 months earlier was gone, replaced by a confident soldier who had found her place in the world. Families filled the bleachers surrounding the parade ground, cheering and waving flags as the graduating companies marched past. Sarah scanned the crowd briefly but didn't expect to see anyone she knew. She had sent a graduation announcement to her aunt in Los Angeles, but hadn't really expected her to make the trip. That's when she spotted a familiar face in the crowd and nearly broke formation in surprise. Her Aunt Maria was sitting in the 3rd row wearing her best dress and holding a small American flag. Next to her sat Sarah's cousin Carlos, who had driven Maria all the way from California to be here. Sarah felt tears threatening to spill down her cheeks, but managed to maintain her military bearing. She hadn't realized how much it would mean to have family present until she saw them there. The ceremony proceeded with the traditional military pomp and precision. Speeches were given about duty, honor, and service to country. Awards were presented to the top performers in each company. When Sarah's name was called as the distinguished graduate from 3rd Platoon, the highest honor given to the recruit with the best overall performance. The pride on her aunt's face was visible, even from the parade ground. But the moment that would stay with Sarah forever came during the final inspection. As the company commanders moved through the ranks examining each new soldier one last time, Commander Hayes stopped directly in front of Sarah. "Congratulations, Private Martinez," she said formally. Then, in a voice only Sarah could hear, she added, "I'll be in touch about those opportunities we discussed." Sarah nodded slightly, maintaining her position at attention. "Thank you, ma'am." After the ceremony ended and families were allowed to greet the new graduates, Sarah was quickly surrounded by her platoon mates. Jessica threw her arms around her in an enthusiastic hug, followed by Mike, David, and even Brad, who had become a genuinely supportive teammate over the final weeks of training. "I can't believe we actually made it," Jessica said, still emotional from the ceremony. 3 months ago, I wasn't sure any of us would survive Drill Sergeant Johnson. We made it because we learned to work together, Sarah replied. None of us could have done it alone. It was a sentiment she never would have expressed when she first arrived, but now she meant it completely. The bonds forged during basic training had taught her that strength could come from unity, as well as self-reliance. Eventually, the crowd thinned enough for Sarah to make her way to her family. Aunt Maria immediately pulled her into a fierce embrace, speaking rapid Spanish and crying tears of joy and pride. "Mija, I am so proud of you," she said, switching to English. "Your mother would be so proud to see what you've become." Carlos, now 25 and working as a mechanic in Los Angeles, shook her hand formally before also pulling her into a hug. "You look good in uniform, Prima. Really good." "I can't believe you both came all this way," Sarah said, wiping away her own tears. "Are you kidding?" Carlos replied. "My cousin graduating from Army basic training? I wouldn't miss it for anything. Besides, Maria threatened to walk here if I didn't drive her." They spent the next hour talking about Sarah's training experience, her plans for the future, and family news from California. Sarah found herself opening up more than she had in years, sharing stories and feelings she had kept locked away for so long. "So what happens next?" Maria asked. "Where will the Army send you?" Sarah looked around to make sure no one was listening before answering quietly. "I'm not sure yet. There might be some special training opportunities available. I'll know more in a few days." "Special training?" Carlos raised an eyebrow. "Like what kind of special?" "The kind I can't talk about," Sarah replied with a smile. "But it could be really good for my career." As the afternoon wound down and families began to say their goodbyes, Sarah walked her aunt and cousin to their car. Maria handed her a small wrapped package before she left. "This was your mother's," she said simply. "She always said it would protect you." Sarah unwrapped the package to find a small silver pendant on a chain, a medallion of Saint Michael the Archangel, patron saint of soldiers and protectors. Her mother had worn it every day until she became too sick to wear jewelry. "Tia, I can't take this. It's too precious. She would want you to have it. You're doing what she always dreamed of, serving something bigger than yourself. Wear it and remember that you carry her strength with you always." Sarah fastened the chain around her neck, feeling the weight of the medallion against her chest. It was a connection to her past, but also a blessing for her future. After her family left, Sarah returned to the barracks to pack her belongings and prepare for her next assignment. As she folded her civilian clothes, the same simple outfit she had arrived in, she reflected on how much had changed. Jessica appeared in the doorway, also packing her things. "So this is it. End of basic training, beginning of real Army life. Feels surreal, doesn't it?" Sarah replied. "Like we're completely different people than we were 3 months ago. You especially. I remember thinking you were so mysterious and intimidating when you first got here. Now I know you're just someone who's been through more than most people our age and came out stronger for it." Sarah smiled. "And I thought you were just another spoiled rich girl who would wash out in the first week. Shows how wrong first impressions can be." They finished packing in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the future. Tomorrow they would ship out to their permanent duty stations, beginning the next phase of their military careers. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk for the last time, fingering the medallion her aunt had given her. Outside she could hear the familiar sounds of a military base at night. Distant voices, vehicles starting up, the steady rhythm of guard shifts changing. 3 months ago, she had been a lost young woman with no clear direction and no one to depend on but herself. Tonight she was a United States Army soldier with specialized training, opportunities ahead of her, and genuine friendships that would last a lifetime. She thought about Commander Hayes and the mysterious special units she had mentioned. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah felt ready to face them. She had learned to trust others, and just as importantly, she had learned to let others trust her. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah smiled at the irony. She had come to basic training hoping to disappear into the anonymous ranks of the military. Instead, she had been noticed, recognized, and selected for opportunities she never could have imagined. The girl who had been mocked and suspected by her fellow recruits was now respected and admired. The mysterious loner had become a trusted leader. And the young woman who had spent years just trying to survive was about to begin a career that could take her anywhere in the world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities and new ways to serve her country. But tonight, Private Sarah Martinez slept peacefully, surrounded by friends and filled with hope for the future she was about to build.